Hello, welcome to this video on Instantiate. So in this video we're going to see how to instantiate game objects, and we'll get a reference to the instantiated game object and see how we can modify this newly created object. So instantiate means put in the scene and kind of create it. So that's what we're going to do. And what we're going to do is actually create some new sections. So let's start by making this current section that exists here. Let's make that a prefab. And then once we have a prefab for this one section, we can duplicate it and change it around. So we have several different sections that can be created. And then we'll choose different sections to randomly create once the player gets to the end of one of them. So what I used to have here is I had a floor that looked a bit like this. And if I take the floor and move it down, right, I had a floor that looked like this, where there was some empty space on the front and on the end. And so I shrunk the floor down just so it nicely fits within, just barely goes past the last obstacles and coins, and barely goes before the first obstacles and coins. Okay, that's what the floor looks like. And I'm going to take the floor and hold down Control, click on obstacle. Okay, let go. Hold down Shift, click on the last obstacle. Now I have all of these, the floor and all the obstacles selected. Let's just drag them all down here. So I've selected all those things. And what I would like to do is put these all in one game object. Now one option is to take all the obstacles and coins and drag them and drop them on the floor. Okay, but let's look at what the issue is here. Is that the floor is the parent and it actually has a scale applied already. So now if I go to scale the floor some more, say I want to make it thicker at some point, let's increase that. Well, notice not only is the floor getting thicker, but everything that's a child of the floor also increases in its scale. And that's kind of awkward here, right? I don't want these giant pillars and coins. I liked how it was before. So same with a different direction. If it scales in the Z direction, well, now I have these very thick coins and obstacles. So let's undo that, and we'll also undo making these a child of the floor. And instead what we want to do is make a new empty game object. Now if there's no space in the hierarchy to right click and make a new game object, you can always click on this plus in the top left and go to create whatever you want. So I'm going to make it create empty, and I'm going to call this section 1. So this is going to be one of the sections. Okay, I'm going to make sure I reset its position before doing anything else. Okay, so section 1's position is reset to 0, 0, 0. Because I'm going to make this a prefab, so I want to make sure that it's transformed. By default is something reasonable and easy to work with. Okay, now I'm going to make everything, so floor and all these obstacles and coins, make those a child of the section. Okay, but actually before I do that as well, I want to watch out for where the section is actually positioned. So right now the section, it says its position is at 0, 0, 0. Well, where is 0, 0, 0 in the world? Now if I unparent the floor here, right, and so the floor is over here, well, this floor is at Z of 22. So 22 is over here, and 0 is actually going to be closer back here to where the canvas is. In fact, it might be exactly 0 where the canvas is, just for reference. But it's going to be somewhere around here. So this section is currently located at 0, which is around here where my mouse is. But its visual, like all its children, are actually way up here. So it's going to be useful if let's unparent, okay, unparent everything again. Go to my section 1, and let's position section 1. So it doesn't have to be 0, 0, 0 right now. Position section 1 right at the back, or this is the front actually, right at the front of this section. Let's put it right there. So that's pretty good. A bit of overlap is okay. And that's where this section's origin is going to be, right? So that's the position right there. Now I'll take the floor and all the children, and I'll make those all a child of section 1. Okay, now this is section 1 here, so its origin is at its beginning here at the front. And if I put this at 0, 0, 0, well, what it means is that the beginning of the section 1, is at 0, 0, 0 here, and it extends forward. So that's something that's going to make our life a bit easier later when we're instantiating these sections. But if you don't get that exactly right, there's lots of ways to work around it. But this is just a way to make our life easier in the long run. Okay, so that's 0, 0, 0. And now we want to make a prefab out of this section 1. So let's go back to our prefabs folder. And notice we have coins and obstacles. If we had a lot more, I might make a folder for them. But with just a few things there, that's okay. I'll drag section 1 and I'll drop it in the prefabs folder. And now I can actually just delete this section 1 from the hierarchy because section 1 is a prefab here. So double click on it. There's the prefab. If I want to put it in the scene, I just take section 1, drag it, and drop it in the scene. Okay, notice it can get placed in lots of different places. But if I put 0, 0, 0, it's back there, and I can drag it around. Okay, I can even take this section and I can rotate it. Right, so, and notice that it's rotating based on this pivot point at the front here. Right, so that rotation there is based on the origin, and so it's helpful to have the origin right at the start. And because we might be able to use this later on to actually allow the map to have some elevation to go up and down in the path. So that's kind of a cool idea. But for now, we'll put the rotation back there again. And I'm actually going to get rid of section 1 from the hierarchy again. Now open up section 1. And I want you to spend a little bit of time making a few more sections. Right? So take section 1 in your prefabs folder, and you can duplicate it. We get a section 2. Duplicate it, get a section 3. So pause the video right now, take some time, and just make sure you modify those so you have some interesting sections. All right, welcome back. So I've modified my sections. I did it a little quickly, to be honest, but I made some pretty treacherous sections the player is definitely going to be afraid of. So this one is mostly 5 coins and lots of obstacles. This one is mostly 10 coins and lots of obstacles, and of course I'm realizing my obstacles should probably take away more of a penalty, so I'm going to make my obstacle penalty more like a 10. So this game is getting really intense here. So that's good to see. Good to see the player being challenged a little bit. Anyways, I have these sections, and so what I would like to do is be able to actually instantiate these as the game is playing. So let's set up this first, let's set up some logic to actually instantiate these sections as the game goes. So how about I decide to always put section 1 down first. Let's take section 1. I'll put it down at the beginning. Okay, I'll put it at 0, 0, 0. Maybe I'll take our player here. So take the player and the starting floor, right, and I'll move those up so that it lines up nicely with section 1. And there's how we'll start the game. The player runs into section 1. And when the player gets near the end of section 1, what I want to do is have some sort of trigger that the player hits, and it generates a new section. So we could, of course, have a timer of some sort. So we time when the player has run enough time, it'll add a new section onto the end. But that's a bit imprecise, and I think one thing that would be nice for this game is if the player started to run faster over the course of the game. And so the timer might not be that effective or might not be that accurate eventually. So I think a better way is to open up a section here and say put a trigger in at the end. And so one way to put a trigger in at the end that's pretty easy here is let's right click on section 1. That's going to be the parent. Go to make a cube. Okay, we'll call this end trigger, and let's move that end trigger down here to near the end. Okay, let's expand it so that it covers the whole path here. It doesn't have to be too precise. We'll expand it vertically as well so the player can't jump over it. And we'll raise it up a little bit. So that's a pretty good end trigger. And now all we have to do is uncheck the mesh renderer. In fact, we could even take the renderer right off, so we don't actually need the renderer, right? And even the cube mesh filter, right? We don't need the mesh, right? So all this object is a collider, and it's invisible to the player, but we know that it's there. Maybe we can make it a bit wider just in case, and just so we know they hit it, so they don't phase through it at all. Okay, sometimes a player, if you're doing transform.translate and they're going very fast, can translate from one end of the of the collider to the other end and it won't hit it. So making it a bit wider doesn't hurt at all. Okay, and now if the player hits this collider, then we will do something. Mainly, we'll just instantiate a new section at the end of this path. So let's go to let's figure out how we want to detect if the player collides here. So remember that we have let's look at the script for player collision. Let's go to player collision. So here we have this on trigger enter, and if the player hits an I collidable, then we're going to do something. That's one way we could do this. We could make this this trigger. We could make this this end trigger actually have a script that detects when the player when the player detects that it enters it, it'll have some method called on it. Let's try that and see if that's going to work. So let's go make a new script. We'll call this section generator. Okay, we'll let it reload. Okay, take section generator and drop it on end trigger. So this end trigger is now now has a section generator script on it. Okay, let's open that up and let's implement that interface. So I collidable that we defined before. It's going to make us define on collide with player. So let's go public void on collide with player. Okay, it needs to take a player collision. That's how we defined it. And if you don't remember how we defined it, you can always go back and look in the interface or any other scripts. But here's how we defined it. Now iCollidable says that's okay. You've implemented the interface. So if we collide with the player, what do we want to do? Well, here it's not actually about the player. Right here it's actually about generating a new section. So this is okay. There's nothing wrong with this, but we might not need this player collision. But I think it's okay to still use this on collide with player method. And so let's just make sure this is getting called. So we'll go debug.log collided with player. Okay, we'll just make sure that that is being called in section generator. And we have some other messages that are being debug.logged as well. We could look for those messages and try to disable them, but we'll just make sure we hit that one trigger. I'll set the player speed to be quite fast, just so we get there quickly. Let's make it 20. Okay, wait through our little intro. We start running. Oh, game ended right away. Well, maybe I should make the obstacles be a little less powerful. Okay, so I'll go to the obstacles and I'll just make sure the obstacles don't take away any penalty. Just temporarily, just so that we can test this. We'll make sure that section 1 here has this trigger, and it looks like it does. Okay, it should be called end trigger right there. So end trigger should be detecting. Maybe it needs to be a trigger. That's probably okay. It needs to be a trigger there. End trigger. Let's try playing it, and we'll just make sure that we get our message printed. Okay, on our player, I'll just increase the speed to 18, and we see the collided with player get printed in the console here. So there's a bunch of other messages, but collided with player is one of them. So let me just take away these other debug.logs. I don't need to print coin counter anymore. I also don't need to print this responding to on coin collected, and I also don't need to be printing this collided with player. So we know that those are all working. Okay, save those, come back. Okay, so when we collide with the player, what do we want to do? Well, the section generator says we probably want to generate a new section. That's what the name implies. Okay, so what I'll get you to do in section generator as your first challenge is to define an array of prefabs that you can choose from to generate, and then to randomly select one of the prefabs when the collision happens. So I'll let you pause the video and try that. Okay, good job trying the challenge. So let's go ahead and define an array here. So it's going to be private. And how do we define an array of prefabs? Because prefab here isn't actually a type. We can't put prefab. So a prefab is just a game object. So you can just put game object. And another option is to put transform, right, which is going to get the transforms associated with those prefabs. But we can just put game object. I'm going to call this section prefabs. Right, so these are all the different sections that we can create. And currently this is one section we can create, this one game object. If you put your open, close square brackets, then this is an array of game objects. And on collide with player, we'll say we want to randomly select one game object. Okay, what we're going to do is just go make a reference, make a variable that's going to store the reference to the one that we choose. So I'll say selected prefab or selected section, right, is going to be equal to, and let's go section prefabs. And if we put 0, for example, that's going to choose the first one, right? We want to actually choose one random one. So we put random dot range, and here we're going to use the this method overload that takes two ints. So min inclusive. So the first one is 0. That's inclusive. So the lowest one we could choose is 0. The highest number we could choose is going to be one less than this max number. So the length here is going to be section prefabs dot length, right? And that means the highest number we can choose is length minus 1, which is what we want. So we randomly selected a section. So good job if you got that far. And now what we want to do, because this is still a prefab here that we have a reference to, what we want to do now is actually instantiate it. So let's go and write instantiate. This is a function in the mono behavior. If you hover over it, or it's actually a function in object, okay. That's going to instantiate whatever game object, or you can put a different reference type in here as well. We'll put game object inside instantiate, and it's just going to create it. So let's just see what that does. It may not be pretty. It's not going to be where we want it to be, but that will work for now to at least do something. Let's make sure that works. Okay, so when the player hits this this end trigger, it should instantiate a section. Now section prefabs needs to be populated here. So let's go to the prefabs folder, and we'll go to, again, this end trigger, and just make sure that we can put let's lock the inspector here, make sure we put all 3 of these sections, right, in section prefabs. Okay, there's section 1, 2, 3. And now if we press run and hit the end trigger, okay, we should hopefully see one section get instantiated somewhere. Okay, so sure enough, it got instantiated. It got instantiated at position 0, 0, 0. That's the default position for this prefab. And that is actually right where this current one is. So what we need to do is actually instantiate it somewhere else, or at least instantiate it and move it somewhere else. So one way we can do that is to get a reference to the newly created object. So maybe I'll rename selected section to selected prefab. Or just to be clear here, this is a prefab, and I'll name this one here selected prefab as well. And then when I instantiate that prefab, this becomes an actual game object in the scene. So here this is a reference to a game object. I'm going to call it created section equals instantiate. Okay, this is the created section, so the new one. And now what I can do is I can say created section dot transform dot position is equal to, well, where do I want to put this in the scene? Well, if we just look manually, right, we could see this floor. Well, I guess what we want to know is what's the position right at the end of this floor here. So I could go make a new empty game object just temporarily, right? Bring it over here, right down here, and I can see, well, what's the what's the position at the end here. So this position at the end is about, this game object here, it's about, oh, we have to unlock the inspector. I often forget to do that. Right, the Z position is about 32 at the end here. Could be a little, yeah, we'll say it's about 32. Yeah, about 32 is good. Okay, so what we could do is say, right, probably want 0 and 0 and a Z of 32. Right, is going to be new vector 3, 0, 0, and a Z of 32. Okay, so this will probably work for this one section, right? On collide with player, we'll put it at a position of 32. And let's just make sure that works. Okay, we should see another section get instantiated when we get near the end. See, there we go, a new section. But now let's look at the scene. What happens when I reach the end of that section? Well, first of all, there's no trigger in it. So we're going to have to go update our other sections to also have this end trigger. I think what I can do is copy this end trigger, go into section 2, and paste it here. So section 2, Control V. Okay, end trigger is there. And go to section 3, and Control V, and end trigger is there as well. Okay, so that's no problem. Now we have an end trigger in both of those. We also need to set the actual list of prefabs. So we'll lock section 2 end trigger. Okay, those prefabs go in there. Section 3 end trigger, we'll lock it, and we'll lock on end trigger, and these 3 prefabs are going to go in there as well. Okay, now let's see what happens when we hit the end of the trigger. Okay, so let's go hit the trigger at the end of the first section, and we get a new one. Now in our scene, we see when we hit the trigger at the end here, well, first of all, we have seem to have crashed, so we're not moving forward anymore. Let's see, this end trigger is not a trigger, so this end trigger in section 1 needs to be a trigger. Not sure why it became not a trigger, but we'll make sure that in all of these that is a trigger. Okay, section 1. So end trigger up there. Okay, try it one more time. Okay, hopefully we don't have any big issue this time. There we go. Okay, watch our scene again. Okay, so we reached the end, and you probably noticed we got a new, I should have paused it there, but we got a new section generated on top of it. Not surprisingly, because we hit this, we place the new section right on 0, 0, 32 again. So what we could do is have a variable called z position and keep adding 32 to it every time. But an even nicer solution is to actually just put a new game object here in section 1, right? Or in every section, put a game object at the very end that's going to say this is where you should instantiate the new section. So let's go and do that. So in section 1, I'm going to right click, make a new empty game object. I'm going to call it next section position. Okay, and let's put that empty game object at the very end. Again, we know it's about 32, right? And you can get even more precise with that. Okay, next section position is going to be right at the end like that. That's very nice. That's where the next section will get instantiated. And now our end trigger has no prefabs in it anymore, so we need to add those. For some reason, those got removed, so let's add those 3 there. Okay, so section 1 has them. Needs to have its own self as a prefab as well. Okay, there's section 1. Here's section 2. Okay, so itself, yeah, I think that's okay. And section 3 here, end trigger, that's okay. Okay. And now section 1, 2, and 3 are all also going to need this next section position. So let's copy next section position from section 1, go to section 2 and paste it there. Go to section 3 and paste it there. Okay, and now they all have it. I'll put next section position up high for section 1. Okay, now this end trigger is going to need to know, well, where is the next section position? So it's going to need a reference to the next section position. Right, this is actually a game object. We can actually write transform here instead, and that way it actually gets the transform component directly from next section position from that game object. Okay, now in section 1, the end trigger is going to want to know where's the next section position. Well, let's drag that one in there. That's section 1. Now in section 2, the end trigger is going to want to know where it is as well. So we'll drag that in for all of them. In section 3, next section position there as well. Okay, so that is all 3 sections set up with the next position. Now, if you're running into this problem and you're having to do this, copy this for 4, 5, or 6 sections, you might consider making prefab variants, right? That would actually have made my life a lot easier here if I had a base section and then I made variants, and on the base section I could add all these next section position and end trigger and whatnot. But for now, this is how we've been doing it, and I think it's going to work okay. So now when we go to make the new section and we set its position, well, let's just set its new position to next section position dot position. And so this is the game object. In fact, it's the transform dot position. Okay, so this is the transform of that little game object at the very end of every section. Okay, so that should work as the basic elements here of this endless runner. Let's just make sure that's working. Okay, so I found a little way around my game. I can just stay on the right side. I should modify that. But it looks like it's working pretty well. This is pretty endless. It looks like more sections are coming up. So make sure your game can do that. Now this is as far as I'm going to take you in this part of the video, but we are going to continue after a challenge. So your challenge is going to have a few parts to it here. The first part of your challenge is going to be to just go ahead and make several prefabs that represent different sections of the path that can all be instantiated. And then to select and instantiate a random path in the correct position when the player approaches. Okay, now a bonus challenge here, this is a little bit tricky for sure, is to make some path sections appear on an incline or a decline, like going up or down a hill. Actually, that's not that tricky. I said it was, but maybe not. So make some path sections appear on an incline or decline. So how do you control the incline or decline there? That's an interesting question. And another part of this is going to be potentially to define a scriptable object that can hold the section prefab. So you don't have to constantly add all 3 or 4 or 5 sections into the array. And you might even have, if it was a very interesting game, you might even have 20 or 30 sections. So that could be a lot of work to make those sections. But make sure that you have one serialized object, one scriptable object rather, that can hold all those prefabs, and you give the section generator just a scriptable object instead of having to define the prefabs repeatedly. So that's your challenge. I'll invite you to pause the video and try it and see what you can do. All right, welcome back from the challenge. Good job trying that. So we already have several prefabs here, and we are instantiating a random path in the correct position every time. And now we're wondering if we can make some path sections appear on an incline. So let's see how we might do that. So let's go back to our the part of our code where we are actually instantiating these game objects, and let's see if we can not only set their position, but also their rotation. Now we have created section dot transform dot rotation equals. We have that. But rotation, this data type, is actually a quaternion. And so how do we actually set the specific rotation we want? Well, a quaternion represents a rotation, but not in the XYZ rotations that we normally think of. But we can use this method called Euler angles, or rather just quaternion.Euler, and give it a vector 3 with the XYZ rotations that we want to think about. X is going to be the one that's changing, so that's going to be maybe, let's say we do 10, and then Y would be 0 and Z would be 0. Let's see if that works. So quaternion.Euler is going to return a quaternion, but it takes these Euler angles, so there's X, Y, and Z rotations, and it is going to return a quaternion based on that rotation. So let's see if that works here. Okay, let's hit the end section and see if we get all these sections appearing at a 10-degree angle upwards. Or downwards, it seems. Okay, so downwards is happening. More downwards. That looks pretty good, actually, doesn't it? So that's downwards. I guess minus 10 would probably go up. I think we should choose a random angle. So let's go float random angle is equal to, and here we're going to use random.range, and here we'll use the float version. So the lowest one we'll do is minus 10, which will probably make it go upwards, it seems, and the 10 will be the highest one we choose. Okay, so here's our random angle, and now we can set random angle in there. That's kind of interesting. We'll see what that looks like. Okay, so we'll set the rotation. Right, and then we'll set the position. And rotating before setting the position might make a difference here. In some cases, it definitely would make a big difference to rotate and then move it versus setting the position and then rotating. So the order will matter, but I think here rotation and then position will be okay. Okay, this one goes up a little bit. That's kind of neat. This one is fairly flat. Got some coin here. That one's way up there. Yeah, so this is looking pretty good. I like the up and down movement of it. It makes it quite interesting. I'm realizing my game needs to be a lot harder too. It's a little too easy. I'm actually not losing any points for colliding with obstacles too. So some bugs to fix here. So I'll let you fix the bug where I'm not getting any, oh, the obstacle of coin penalty is 0. That's why. So let's just make that nice big 15 as well. Okay. So we have our obstacle coin penalty again. Fix that bug. So that's looking pretty good. The last part of the challenge is the scriptable object. So let's go back to our scripts, scriptable objects, and we'll make a new scriptable object. So we'll call this sections scriptable object. So sections SO. Open it up, and this is going to inherit from scriptable object. Okay, I'm just going to go, I think we made it public in the last scriptable object. Just verify here. So coin SFX, it was public. Yeah, we'll use public again. Okay, so we'll go public. It's going to be an array of game objects. We'll call it sections or section prefabs, something like that. Okay, and we need our create asset menu. There's our sections scriptable object. So let's go create an instance of this scriptable object. Make our sections SO. We'll call it sections SO. There's just one of them. Okay, and here in our prefabs, we'll lock the inspector here. We'll go down to prefabs and we'll put these 3 sections in there. Okay, and now on our well, this is an empty game object from before. I can delete that one. Okay, now on our player, we'll unlock the inspector again, or rather on our section where we have this this end trigger. Right, we have section prefabs 1, 2, and 3 here. Let's change this so it takes the section the sections SO, and the data type is going to be sections SO as well. Okay, and instead of doing section prefabs like that, here section prefabs the same name, we're just going to go sections SO dot section prefabs and sections SO dot section prefabs. Okay, so that's going to work the same way, but here we're accessing it through the scriptable object. And the benefit here is that now in, let's go to section 1. So here's a section 1 prefab. Right here, the sections SO I can get from my assets folder. Right, so here's the sections SO, the scriptable object. I can do the same thing for section 2 and section 3. So let's go find them in prefab mode. Here's section 2. Right, lock the inspector, and I can go to lock the inspector here on end trigger, and go get the scriptable object and drop it in there, and do the same thing for section 3. Okay, we'll lock the inspector on end trigger. We'll go get our asset, and we'll drop it in sections SO. Let's make sure that that's still working. Okay, that works. Very steep section, I like it. I'm losing points here. See if I can lose the game. And game over, and we switch back to the main menu, and I can restart, and it's counting down here. So very nice, I like it, and you can lose right away if you want to. Okay, that's great. So that's this video. That is the instantiate function and a whole bunch of bonus content in this video as well. So that's the end of most of the content for this tutorial series. There are a few more videos, so please watch all the videos through. And at the end, there's also some added challenges to that are definitely part of the tutorial series. So they're not just extras; they're definitely challenges to try to implement. And then to as well make this game your own. So I will let you continue on with the videos, but good job getting to this point. You're almost done. We'll see you in the next video.